and welcome to Sustainability Mindshift, where we are exploring what it takes to be a sustainability leader today, specifically the skills, the capabilities, and the mindsets that are essential for success. We're your hosts, Brad Pierce and Melker Larson, and we're excited and honored to have Giles Hutchins here with us today. Giles is a pioneering practitioner. He's a keynote speaker, an advisor, and an executive coach at the forefront of the revolution in organizational and leadership consciousness and development. He's the author of several books, including The Nature of Business, The Illusion of Separation, Future Fit, and Regenerative Leadership. Over the last 25 years, he's been an international management consultant and head of practice with KPMG, and also global sustainability director at Atos, a technology multinational with over 100,000 employees worldwide. His real passion, though, is helping leaders sense into their life purpose, to become conscious, and to help them create the conditions for their organizations to become vibrant, future-fit, living organizations. As one CEO has said, in times when business leaders are struggling with volatility and uncertainty about the future of their organizations, Giles Hutchins lays out a path for transformational change. Among other things, Giles is co-founding partner of Regenerators and Biomimicry for Creative Innovation. He's also the chair of the Future Fit Leadership Academy and advisor to a number of forward-thinking institutions. Lastly, and I love this part, he also runs a 60-acre ancient woodland leadership immersion center near London in the UK. I can't wait to go check that one out. As one participant in his program has said, it is rare to find such a combination of business insight, consciousness, sustainability, and next-generation leadership skills blended with ancient wisdom traditions and cutting-edge research. If you want to learn more about Giles, you can visit his www.gileshutchins.com or follow his blog at www.thenatureofbusiness.org. Giles, welcome, and great to have you here today with us.
Yeah, good to be with you, Brad. Good to be with you. Thank you for inviting me here this afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. The time difference here. Well, I want to start off, big news this week. The much anticipated and dreadfully real and scary UN IPCC assessment report on climate change came out. It was released yesterday, and it confirms that climate change is indeed real. It's here, it's happening, as we've seen with the news, with all the tipping points being experienced right now. It also confirms, that the speed and scale of today's climate change is actually human caused. And in fact, that we're in trouble. The scary part is that it says this is kind of a code red for humanity. I just want to quote something here real quick. In the report, it said, global surface temperature will continue to increase until at least the mid-century under all emission scenarios considered. And a warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius and 2 degrees Celsius will be exceeded during the 21st century unless deep reductions in carbon emissions, CO2, and other greenhouse gas emissions occur in the coming decades. So as we talk about here in Sustainability Mindshift, I think many would agree as well that we have many of the technical solutions and strategies and best practices, and we have the human ingenuity in place to slow down that change. But what we lack is that action, or enough ambitious action to implement those solutions and get the stuff done. So why is it hard, Giles? What's getting in our way? You've worked at KPMG, understand before, and you've been in the corporate space. What's getting in the way of corporate leaders helping cause this shift?
Well, the short answer is consciousness and connection. But there's a lot underneath both those words. And we're suffering from a lack of connection, which is creating a impoverished consciousness, which tunes us out of life, and therefore means that we act in ways that actually undermine life. Climate change, massive issue. It is but a symptom of a deeper underlying problem that we all face.
So tell me about so that you clearly have come to this awareness and this awakening yourself. You had your own personal transformation coming out of the corporate world at KPMG. Tell me a little bit more about that. What was it that caused you to have this change of mindset?
Well, I purposely went into business many moons ago because I actually had a bit of a shift. I had an awakening, had a few epiphanies when I was a child, actually quite early on. But it was actually when I was about 15 that I was shown some videos of animals being tested on live in laboratories, being skinned alive in factory farms, in abattoirs and so forth. And it completely, it shocked me. and set me on a path to which, in so doing, I kind of unraveled a lot of other stuff, like widespread deforestation, pollution in the seas, and so forth. So this was in the 80s, and I hadn't really come across any people. We weren't really talking about sustainability in those times, and yet there were lots of people exploring these issues. And so that sent me down a bit of a rabbit hole, which made me sort of realize that the civilization I was being sort of groomed into wasn't actually civilized. And so I vowed to go into business, because it seemed that business was always being given as the solution. The reason why we were doing what we were doing is because it's just business, and it's, that's what business is about. So I went into business over the years, in being involved. I wore many hats, from property, law, finance, through to management consultancy for many years, and then into sustainable business. And then more recently, now as an executive coach for leaders. So I've been on a bit of a journey, and that latest sort of metamorphosis, what brought me out of KPMG into this work, was actually a David Attenborough program, and much later on, in around 2005, 2006, which really sort of cajoled me into action when he said the time is now to act, because of the unraveling that we're facing. So yeah, that sent me into sustainable business, and that led on to me being global head of sustainability for Atos. But really, I came to quickly realize that that was only part of the solution, and that actually what was underpinning all of this really was consciousness, this quality of thinking that we're separate from life itself, that we're separate from our own selves, separate from each other, separate from the world around us, and that was creating a corruption in the way in which we then attended to life. And everything that flowed from that was corrupted, whether it be our solutions or property strategies, the way in which we create value propositions. All of that was being corrupted because of this quality of consciousness. So that sent me more into that space around exploring how do we allow people to heal and to shift their consciousness.
It's so interesting, the stuff you've talked about, that your own personal transformation took many years, many different experiences, starting with seeing animals, being tortured, and I think a lot of us can relate to that, because we see the news, there's a lot of information and examples out there of poor treatment of beings, whether they're human or other, on the planet. And your shift, in thinking and then becoming a sustainability director. How did, this is the challenge I had when I was leading sustainability for a big bank. How do you actually transfer that level of sort of awareness and knowledge and understanding of especially the systems that are in place that cause some of these problems to exist onto another human being? How do you can't just tell them to change. You can't say, like with the IPCC report, all the news today is about, this is the decade of action. We must change. We must, change our behaviors and act more now than just be aware of things. But can people? Is it that simple? Can people just flip on a dime and act differently?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to this, and how do we engage and encourage people to go through their own journey of transformation? Because we can engage in experiences, or we can use knowledge or facts or science, or we can take people out into the field to shock them, or we can take them through processes of learning. But often those are sort of sheep dips, if you like, they're sort of one-off experiences, and then we're back in. So how does one actually take someone, a person, a human being, through a journey that facilitates a lifelong shift? And that's what I've been exploring through my work and why I take people out into nature. But I've also found through COVID that you can do a lot of work on the internet, which is really quite heartening for me. I wasn't that much of a proponent of taking people through deep journeys over the internet, but I found over the last 18 months, 20 months, that actually you can. I've proven it a number of times. So I'm happy, because I think that some of the wider, bigger programs that I've seen people do through the internet, I think have an effect. But But we've got to recognize that what we talk about in the book is this regenerative leadership, is this journey of separation and this journey of reconnection. And they are two different qualities of consciousness. The journey of separation is this going to kind of get more and more caught up in the left brain hemisphere about what we know, the facts, the figures, breaking things down, which is important. We need to have that. And the journey of reconnection is when we start reconnecting aspects of our own selves and our systems that allows us to draw upon both the left and right brain hemisphere, draw upon embodied experience, open up the heart intelligence as well as just the head, and sense into the field. And that is a different quality of consciousness, that reconnection. And the facts and figures and the scientists, which we need, is actually appealing to the left brain hemisphere, and which is good. But we also need to have that whole engagement. Otherwise, because the environmental movement, I mean, I've been involved in it for many, many, many years, has often been about, pushing the facts or showing pictures of animals being tortured or rainforests being destructed. And it doesn't necessarily always, it can have the reaction of actually pushing people back. To fully engage people, to take people across the threshold, is a different engagement. And it reminds me of a quote from the French writer, Anton de Saint-Exupéry, I think is the way to pronounce it, who says that if you want to build a ship, don't assign people tasks or break them up into teams, but actually teach them to long for the immensity of the sea. Mm-hmm. And we are not really often teaching people to long for the immensity of the sea when producing these scientific reports. There is an immensity to life, to our human beings. We love life. We are loving beings. And we ought to be starting to tap into that capacity to love ourselves, to love each other, to love life. And I feel that connection has yet to be fully brought in to the shift that we're going through it. When it will be, and it is starting to be, then we will see a shift from that story of separation to reconnection, and things will unfold much quicker.
That's powerful. I just, as a follow-on real quick, I know, Melker, you got a question. So it's interesting that you're able to do this virtually, because I wonder how leaders, when they're surrounded by the business as usual atmosphere and environments that they're in, how you can help them sort of, gain new lenses and new perspectives when they're still stuck in that system, especially one that's unchanged, as opposed to, bringing them out into nature as you do on your farm in England and through your other programs. It sounds like it's possible then, I mean, by just working them through thinking and communication and dialogue online.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I've sort of perfected my own little way, and the other people I've come across have other ways, and it's not that they're better or worse, but we have to find ways that resonate for us and for our own energy. So what I do when I coach executives, so I work with leaders because of the catalytic effect and knock-on impact that they can have in their areas. So we're working with, if you like, trendsetters that then go out and change the system. That's the effect of working with systems change. And so when I work with leaders, I take them through a process. So I give them homework. So it's not like just coaching sessions, engaging in dialogue and letting them process. It is work, and I am guiding them through a learning journey of enabling them to see with new eyes. And on the one hand, that is deeply challenging and requires courage. On the other hand, it's actually beautifully simple, because it's about us returning back to life. So one needs to be aware of how the left and right brain hemisphere work, how sometimes you need to feed something, you need to give some science, you need to give some structure, you need to give some practices and so forth. And also be aware of the embodied, the experiential, and the imaginal realm, and the intuitive, and opening that up. So playing with both of those. And often business people that I work with are starved of that access to the imaginal, to the intuitive, to the emotional, because of how pressured people are. Just came off a call with a senior executive of a big, one of the big four consulting companies, and looking after strategy there for many. And so she works with many organizations. So she's a good tipping point. She's doing 15, 16-hour days in front of the screen. So one has got to, when you're coaching someone in that environment, you've got to meet them where they're at and then take them on a journey without being able to take them out into nature because it's over Zoom. And yet one can do that. One can give them practices. For instance, she is actually going on holiday. And so we talked about how we can use her holiday, a 1-week holiday, which she's already unfortunately got, filled up with things, how that can be used as a way to start seeing with new eyes. And actually the holiday is today. Every day is a holiday if we wish. It's a way to embrace life with a different perspective, to open up, to get perspective, to try and notice the ego, to notice our triggers and realize that anything that's happening now is actually there to help us potentially learn about ourselves and our own triggers. So we shift it from being kind of stress and challenge into how can we actually work with what is coming through us. So it's like a martial art. It's an Aikido.
Yeah, that's a whole separate topic that I know you're into a lot of that and have some great solutions for people even through that martial arts and your ability to tap into people's innate desire, to return to life is really powerful. Melker, you had a question.
Yeah, and it's partly been answered by already, Giles, but I'm so intrigued by the way you speak about this and bringing connectedness into business, because it's a field where I sense that these embodied ways and these intuitive ways of knowing can kind of get separated from that context. But I'm interested to hear more about taking people from feeling the ecological grief and pain towards this, as you mentioned, longing for the sea. And how do you go about bringing these more softer skills, these other hemisphere skills and mindsets to help people see a wider picture of reality? How do you go about bringing that into these leaders' daily lives and the boardrooms and those types of settings? Is it embraced with warm arms in usual settings, or do you have to inspire them to see the value of what you're talking about?
Yeah. So, let's try and make this simple this is what the left hemisphere does. It wants to compartmentalize things. And there's a good reason for that, because reality is quite complex. So if we divide up what you just said, because there's a lot there, into working with the self, with an individual, or working with a group or a team, like a leadership team, and then working with an organization, a complex adaptive system, because they're slightly different, yet there is some commonalities that we can work with. So if you're working with an individual, then often there are rhythms in life that we're not always aware of. We probably were aware of them naturally as a child, and we may have been brought aware of them throughout our life, but actually that usually we're kind of pushing over the rhythms. So there are simple rhythms like spring, summer, autumn, winter. The rhythm of the day, waking up, coming into a different quality of consciousness, out of sleep time, into more a beta state of brainwave patterns, and then going through the day and noticing how we go through and our emotions, what happens after lunch, and what happens when we get tired, and how that then drifts into the evening and then the nighttime. So there's a rhythm in the day, and there's a rhythm to our week if we allow it, if we allow ourselves to sort of slow down a bit on Saturday and maybe even cruise into dream time on Sunday, and then back into the rhythm again. So we can create these rhythms, and life is about rhythms. And so often explaining the rhythm to the individual is important. And one of the things I do is talk about some of the rhythms that we have in life, and ask people to explore where they are at in their own lives and what do they relate with. So if we talk about the seasons, for instance, that often, people who are going through a shift might see themselves going from that autumn into winter, but they're actually scared of the winter because we've been trained to enjoy the spring and the summer. And so we can explore that. For an organization or a team, a leadership team, then to your point of how do you gain the mandate to even engage in this, I think one has to work with a couple of people first and gain that trust. and then from there pivot into working with a group. The client who just arrived here before we started the call, and I was telling you about, who were walking past my window, the first time I met with them, it was a group of them, 10 people came here for a workshop. And so in that space, I had to build the trust of enough people in that group for them to go, okay. And we were lucky that, or it happened that the CEO and the co-founder of the company were like, okay, we get this. And so that was the mandate. That was an embodied experience, and that actually came about through trust, through them sensing their own consciousness, having a deep experience, but then gaining that trust and going, yeah, okay, we kind of get this. Okay, so what? But then you have to quite quickly follow the so what up with some left brain hemisphere stuff. How does this relate to our business? How does this relate to our strategy? How is this going to relate to our culture? So you have to be able to speak that language. Mm-hmm. And so that's the dance, that's the yin yang dance, the yang being the kind of outer creative. How does this help our value proposition? How does this help the future of business? And the yin being, this is what's connecting me to life. I know inherently that this is allowing me to flow, and it's going to allow my organization to flow better.
It's so powerful, and I love that you especially in your recent book, the most recent book, you're focused on leadership, and that's really a lot of where we're going to be focusing in this in these discussions. Although we're going to broaden it to human development in general, because as you said, there's leaders are the top of the house, and it's important that they are aligning their organizations around this new vision for regenerative leadership, if it's that, and call it sustainability leadership as well. And it must be a challenging time for them to be able to speak to their teams about things that, formerly we're sort of seen as, for lack of a better term, sort of hokey or, squishy, talking about, I've heard you mention in the past, when you're out in nature, being able to even just absorb the energy from a tree and gaining yourself energy and giving back that energy, to be able to take that into a team setting, it's got to be hard for some leaders.
Well, we've got to recognize, and this is part of the journey of sort of from separation to reconnection, is recognizing, and one can draw upon very good adult developmental psychology and advanced leadership tools to explain that. Yeah, so that's important. So we go, oh, okay, right. But the organization is made up of energy. Mm-hmm. It's made up of human relationships that are exchanges of energy all the time. So, an important pivot in all of this is shifting from the organization as a machine, top-down, hierarchic, siloed, command and controlled, KPI obsessed, that kind of mentality where we're pushing, we're going against things, and it's tiring, it's stressful, it reduces down our creativity. We manage people, we control people, it's the power and control dynamic, which is not healthy, it's not regenerative. To actually then opening the door into recognizing that the organization isn't that at all, that's just a mindset, that was there to help us, and it's sometimes useful, but actually much of the time it's kind of getting in the way, to actually helping people see that the organization is full of these relationships. And by giving people permission to do that, inherently in their hearts, they often know that. They might buffer up against it. The voice of judgment might come in, or cynicism. Well, yeah, but hang on, and one needs to be able to deal with that. But inherently underneath it all, they kind of know that these organizations are full of human beings, and that we're complex people, and that we're full of relationships. And we can also look at how dysfunctional the current situation is. We pride ourselves on efficiency and effectiveness. I used to do presentations and talks and consultancy in some of the best companies in the United States. And it was all about efficiency and effectiveness. And then I would explain to them how inefficient and ineffective they are as a result of just simple methods like team meetings. How we have these meetings, which is our main conduit for performing in business. And they're highly inefficient and ineffective. But yet we put up with it because we're just going on this treadmill. This is how we do things. The biggest inefficiency in our businesses today. So if we just speak to the inefficient part of business, which appeals to that left brain, that engineering focus.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest inefficiency today is the fact that we are doing two jobs, each of us in our organizations. One job that we're paid to do, which hopefully is aligning to our purpose and allows us to come alive and express our potential. And the other job that we're not being paid to do, which is just getting in the way and undermining the job that we're paid to do. And that job is managing other people's impressions of ourselves, covering up our blind spots, presenting, pretending, being someone that we're not because we need to show up in a certain corporate mentality. Mm. And we've all had experiences of that. And so we know that, we can sense that. And actually it's a relief for many people to start being able to go, what do you mean? I can actually bring my normal self to work, you know? I don't have to leave myself at the turnstile or when I come onto the Zoom call. And funnily enough, COVID in a kind of strange kind of way has helped mesh that a bit, because we've seen people doing calls with the cat walking along or someone coming in and perhaps not quite made themselves up as they usually would in the office. And so some of those masks are slipping slightly and we're just being a little bit more human with each other, which is nice.
I love that. I just want to pick up on the points there that organizations in its essence is part of people, and that is what makes it up. And putting on these masks can be a necessary carrier of wasted energy. But I want to hear you talk about like how when people bring their whole humanness and come back from getting in touch with more the right hemisphere of the brain and how they apply that, how does it look in a success story when a regenerative leader comes back into an environment that perhaps has yet to change itself? What can that look like and how can that be of benefit to the business?
Yeah. Well, it looks like life. This is the reality. So we're all on these journeys of versions of regenerative, and we're all having to go back into life at this human story that we're in at the moment, which is very far from regenerative. So even if you go back into an organization, or you don't go back into an organization, but you decide to work for yourself and you try and be regenerative, you're still going to have to buff up against a very unregenerative system that we're in. So it's different shades. Sometimes people think, well, I can't go back into the dirty water of that organization because I've now got used to clean water. Well, at some point on this journey, you're going to have to realize that you're going to have to go back into the dirty water one way or another. Now, it may be that you just prefer to be in cleaner water for a while whilst you're going through your transformation, whilst you're still vulnerable, whilst you're still healing, and that's fine, to go out and have a proper process of almost the cocoon of the metamorphosis. And so you don't want to be back in that red in tooth and claw environment whilst that's going on. For sure, that has some validity. And yet at some point one is going to have to go back into the system, and actually a corporate environment is relatively bland compared to some of the other situations that we could be in. You know, let's just drift into Syria for a few days. You know, there's a lot of shit going on the planet at the moment, thanks to the system that we're all complicit in some way. So one way or another, we need to start getting involved in helping process that dirty water, whether that be in a toxic environment. And then in a toxic environment, there's many ways to deal with how to start making it just many ways more regenerative. And we talk about this in the book, the tools that you can use. Ideally, you're starting with the leadership team, which is what I do, working with that leadership team to start creating an environment that celebrates that regenerative potential and starts noticing degenerative behavior, which can be anything from just toxic gossip through to, providing toxic products. Or it can be just you creating a little oasis in your own space. How are you relating to people? Are you having a quick check-in? Or are you allowing for a moment's silence on a meeting? And a lot of these things, you know, they're simple, really simple little mini innovations that we can bring in that immediately rejuvenate ourselves, cost nothing. You don't need to get a budget approved. And usually people around you quite quickly notice and then feel that they have permission to make change. So one organization, sorry.
No, it's interesting. I mean, you know, I keep hearing this word simple, and I used to think the same thing, and maybe you did too, as a head of sustainability. You know, we shout from our soapbox, and speaking of soap and dirty water, and you know, ask people to change, and we even, you know, lay out a roadmap for them. We provide a strategy and say, here it is. You know, I can tell you exactly how to get from point A to point Z. But yet at the same time, I think I'm one of the big questions I'm trying to solve too here, and you've helped with that, is that even with a roadmap, even with the solutions and the strategies and everything else, without that fundamental mindset shift, you talk about it as that metamorphosis. I think it's hard for some leaders to even know where to begin and to do these things, which you and I, who have been in this industry for years and years, consider simple. And so those moments of transformation that you cause through your experiences, whether they're out in nature or online, help people gain that it's sort of just the bare, it's a big mountain to climb to get to that point, but it's just the beginning. I think you would agree, right, of that change.
Yeah. And there are lots of models out there that talk about different levels of consciousness and in leadership and so forth, that I draw upon to help people understand that. And I would wish to allow us to look at it in another way, which is that this is just allowing us to open up to more of how life really is. Because otherwise we can get caught on models and we can get caught on stuff and so forth. So actually all we're doing is just allowing ourselves to tap in to something that is already here. So it's in the moment. We can access it whenever we wish. And all we're doing is creating a set of little processes or invitations or permissions that encourage the courage to connect. And that's really all it is. Now, my job is, because I've been in KPMG, for instance, and I ran a program and I ran complex systems change, and I've had my own P&L, and I've managed a leadership team of 70 people, and I've had those experiences myself. I can meet people where they're at, and I've worked with CEOs, with chairmen and so forth, but that's just giving a sense of trust. It's not actually what the work is about. That's just creating an environment that allows people to go, okay, I feel kind of safe with this person. So maybe these little mini connection activities, I'll give them a go. And then it's just a case of building a muscle, like going to the gym, isn't it? Starting to develop a new habit and noticing when we slip into the old habits and not beating ourselves up about them, and just starting to create the new habits. Whether that be having rather than a 1 hour Zoom call, a 45-minute Zoom call and 15 minutes to actually refresh and reconnect, whether it's just something as simple as that, or whether it be starting to notice our thoughts as we wake up in the morning. We go through that transition period from sleep into beta brainwaves and starting to become friendly with our own brain patterns and how the body works, or doing beautiful practices like Qigong. Whatever it is, you've got to meet people where they're at and then start bringing them in, and then people just follow their own flow. And the job of coaching someone on a journey is then sensing, well, what's working for them? What are they then gravitating more towards? And how's that relating to that bit that they're not gravitating towards? Is that because there's something triggering them, or is it because it's just not right for them now? And, adapting. So you're just helping be a little bit of a navigator as they're going through this journey.
I love it. I'm gonna end it here. That's so beautiful what you said, and just this concept of sensing. I read this quote the other day by Chief Oren Lyons, which I think rings true to what you're saying here. And he says, "We forget and we consider ourselves superior, but we are, after all, a mere part of creation, and we must consider to understand where we are, and we stand somewhere between the mountain and the ant, somewhere and only there as part and parcel of creation," which I think is beautiful. Giles, it's been such a pleasure to have you here with us today. Oh my gosh, I could speak to you forever. I'd love to jump through the screen and give you a big hug. You're an amazing human being. Thank you very much, and look forward to getting over to your farm and exploring your programs.
Thank you both. Thank you for being interested in this work. Much love to you both.
Love to you too, Giles. Thank you.